welcome everybody to the April 24th, 2020 Rotary virtual meeting, our fourth one. First of all, I'd like to thank our greeters, Fran and Ed, for being on early and welcoming all our guests. Not only our club members, but we do have a lot of guests from other clubs, as well as the speakers today. I also like to thank Chelsea from home, either through the Zoom or YouTube Live, and it looks like YouTube Live is up and running and working good. Mike Zwick, thank you for lining up these great programs for our virtual meetings, and it's looking like this may go through, at least virtual-wise, through May, but we'll see what the governor puts out on Monday. So, Secretary's report, there's 41 people that are on, and we'll keep that one short. So, and I don't know if Brandon's on yet, but we're getting about 30 to 40 people on Zoom, and then our live feed through YouTube last week had a high of 35 people watching. So that's a good amount of people that are either through the club through Zoom or virtually watching it through our YouTube site. So we did buy the full version of Zoom, so we have a little more time. We won't be on a time restraint like we were last week where it cuts us off after 40 minutes. So to get back to more of a traditional meeting, I know we're not having lunch. I'm sure everybody's enjoying their own lunch. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome back our Sergeant at Arms to go ahead and give us a report. And also for Happy Bucks and virtual Happy Bucks and fines, it's going to be the honor system. So fines today and Happy Bucks, I'll keep a list and I'll just remind people. All right, so I'll turn it over to Dave.
Okay, great. Very well said, Mr. President. Well, big news this morning. President Trump suggests ingesting or injecting disinfectant as a cure for COVID-19. Most doctors unequivocally reject the idea. Lysol manufacturer says, please don't drink our cleaning products. The Ohio Treasurer's Office says there will be no taxes due in 2020. That's a joke, right? That's a joke. Governor DeWine will, in fact, announce on Monday the new quarantine rules for the state of Ohio. Sports NFL draft pick. Bengals pick Joe Burrow, a native of Athens, Georgia. And Washington Redskins get defensive end Chase Young from OSU. Draft day 2 starts tonight. A few items of interest from around the world, around the country. It is a good week for health and safety after the official ISIS newspaper, Al-Naba, advised its scattered army of martyrdom-seeking terrorists to avoid Europe, the land of the epidemic, for fear of catching coronavirus. Loggers. It's a good week for you to be a logger because the odds of contracting COVID-19 for loggers is the lowest of any of the hundreds of professions analyzed by the New York Times. The nation's 4,680 tree fallers enjoy so much well-ventilated personal space on the job. They are at lower risk of infection than even our 11,620 painters, sculptors, and illustrators. It's a good week for retirement planning, actually last week was, or perhaps for pessimism, with reports that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has been reaching out to senior conservative judges and urging them to consider quitting so they can be replaced while the White House and the Senate are still in Republican hands. And speaking of Republican hands, it'll be a fine. I don't know whether Lampton's on the call today or not, but I have just now received my 42nd mailer from Brian Lampton in regard to his candidacy, second only to the 43 that I've received from Alice DeWine. So there'll be some, and there are lots of pictures on those flyers, so Brian will be fined heartily for all of that effort. It's a good week for priorities after New York Governor, well, last week was, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo exempted liquor stores from his order closing all non-essential businesses. We're probably 3 times as busy as usual, said Sunny Singh of Liquor World in Syracuse. People are stocking up. And it was a good week for shortcuts after Pope Francis advised the planet's 1.2 billion Catholics that if they can't confess in person to a priest during the pandemic, they should, quote, speak directly to God. That's quite a concept coming from a Reformed Presbyterian churchman. The Pope recommended assuring God that I will go to confession afterward, but forgive me now. It was a bad week for Rollo, a 7-year-old dachshund from the UK, who was diagnosed with a sprained tail from excessively wagging it out of joy that his owners were self-isolating at home instead of leaving for work. He's currently on pain relief, and the vet said he should be healed within a week. It was a bad week for sewer lines, which the New York Times reports are getting clogged coast to coast by germ-killing Americans flushing tons of disinfectant wipes and paper towels down their toilets. And an Oregon police department is asking the public not to dial 911 just because they've run out of toilet paper. And a Portland, Oregon strip club, forced to close its doors during the pandemic, has reinvented itself as Boober Eats, whose scantily clad dancers deliver takeout food to lonely customers. Sean Bolden, the owner of the Lucky Devil Lounge, says customers are giddy when one of its 25 strippers comes to their door. And so let's see, we've also got birthdays. I'll just click on here on this database thing. And we've got well, here's the whole month of April. Teresa Garcia on the 5th, Carrie Souter on the 6th, Fran O'Shaughnessy, congratulations Fran, on the 8th of April, Rick Grove on the 15th, Paul Otten on the 21st, and Dave Cusack's birthday will be, what's today? Oh, it was yesterday, the 23rd. Member anniversaries, here we've got Ed and Fran O'Shaughnessy again on the 9th of April. They celebrated 132, that can't be right, must be wrong. See, Jack Henderson, his anniversary, Carrie Tucker's anniversary, Beth Cusack. Oh, Beth and Dave Cusack have the same anniversary on the 11th. Oh no, I'm sorry. These are anniversaries of club participation. Wedding anniversaries, Fran O'Shaughnessy again. Fran and Ed both have the same wedding anniversary on the 22nd. That was just 2 days ago. Fran and Ed, what did you do on that auspicious occasion?
We walked to the kitchen to have dinner. But we actually brought in said earlier, we actually carried in from the Wellington Grill for our special anniversary dinner.
Oh, very nice. Did Ed
including a bottle of wine?
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Words there, yeah.
You guys were really fortunate. Okay, well, congratulations to you. Just a few little things here. These are some of the quarantine humor. A lot of us are seeing this on the, maybe if you're on your computers a lot. I need to get out of this bed. I'm late for moving to the couch. In 8 weeks, 88% of all blondes will disappear from the earth. Somebody had to explain that one to me. I didn't understand why that's going to be happening. If you don't understand that, I can explain it to you. Quarantine has turned us all into dogs. We roam the house all day looking for food. We're told no if we get too close to strangers, and we get really excited about car rides. Anybody else's car getting 3 weeks to the gallon right now? Let's see. Let's see. Dogs in 2020. My husband and I divorced. No, we didn't divorce. My husband and I decided we don't want to have children. We'll be telling them tonight at dinner. It's like being 16 again. Gas is cheap, and I'm grounded. And finally, just to kind of finish this off, we're going to do the Darwin Awards for 2019. You remember the Darwin Awards have to do with Darwin's theory related to evolution of the species, that it is survival of the fittest and it is elimination of the weakest. So here's the #1 winner of the Darwin Awards this week. Can you still hear me? I've had to turn my screen off so I can. You still hear me?
Yep.
Uh-oh.
We can still hear you.
We can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, good. I had to move to my screen so I could read. So the #1 nominee of the Darwin Awards for 2019, from the San Jose Mercury News, an unidentified man using a shotgun like a club to break a former girlfriend's windshield accidentally shot himself to death when the gun discharged, blowing a hole in his gut. The #2 award from the Kalamazoo Gazette, James Burns, 34 years old, a mechanic of Alamo, Michigan, was killed in March as he was trying to repair what police described as a farm-type truck. He got a friend to drive the truck on a highway while Burns hung underneath so he could ascertain the source of a troubling noise. Burns' clothes caught on something, however, and the other man found Burns wrapped in the drive shaft. And finally, well, maybe next to finally, #3 from the Hickory Daily Record. I don't know where Hickory is. Ken Charles Barker, 47 years old, accidentally shot himself to death in Newton, North Carolina. Awakening to the sound of a ringing telephone beside his bed, he reached for the phone, but grabbed instead a Smith & Wesson .38 Special, which discharged when he pulled it up to his ear. And here's one for Cusack. Is Dave Cusack at the club meeting today? Well, here's one especially for Dave Cusack. Police said a lawyer demonstrating the safety of windows in a downtown Toronto skyscraper crashed through a pane with his shoulder and plunged 24 floors to his death. A police spokesman said Gary Hoy, 39 years old, fell into the courtyard of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower early Friday evening as he was explaining the strength of the building's windows to visiting law students. He had previously conducted demonstrations of window strength, according to police reports. According to the Toronto Sun, Hoy was one of the best and brightest members of the 200-man bar association. A person has to wonder what the dimmer members are. Okay, so let me go back to Zoom, get myself back on. Am I coming back on? Well, anyway, I've lost myself, but I will offer the fines. So there's Lampton's fine for the 442 mailers that I've gotten from him. There is a fine for anyone who has been out to a store and did not wear a mask. And it's $1 fine if you've ever cut down a tree, whether you were a professional logger or not. It's $1 fine if you ever flushed a paper towel down the toilet or ordered carry out from Hooters. And it's $1 fine if you didn't get any brochures from either Brian Lampton or Alice DeWine. So turn this back over to the president for the collection of happy bucks.
Well, thank you, Dave. And listen to that round of applause. Unfortunately, everybody's mic is muted. So, are there happy bucks? Any happy bucks out there? Oh.
No happy bucks.
No happy bucks. Okay. Well, we'll get
Here, I'll venture a happy buck. I was picking up my groceries at Kroger on Tuesday, and they finally delivered them and stuck them in my trunk. And when I went to start my car, it didn't, which gave me the opportunity to go to Subaru in Fairborn and get a new battery and see real people.
Okay, any announcements? No announcements? Okay. Please mute your mics, and I'd like to introduce Craig Hagler, who was our last speaker when we were all together before we went virtual, our Greene County Treasurer. He's going to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Alex. It's kind of nice not to have to walk up to the podium, but So today I have the pleasure of introducing Ohio's 49th Treasurer of State, Robert Sprague. Treasurer Sprague graduate Duke University with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and later earned a master's degree in business administration with his emphasis in finance from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. His commitment to strong fiscal stewardship and public service first took root in his hometown of Findlay. Prior to entering state government, he started at his local community as both city treasurer and auditor. In these roles, he balanced city budgets and helped finance a massive recovery effort after historic floods and the 2008 economic recession. Prior to becoming treasurer, he served as the 83rd district member of the Ohio House of Representatives from 2011 to 18. His current role, he oversees the state's investment and debt portfolios, domestic and international custody portfolios, and annual cash movements and deposits. I'm hoping I get to hear more about this, but as treasurer, Sprague successfully launched the Results Ohio initiative, which established an infrastructure within the treasurer's office to support pay-for success programs aimed at combating the social and public health challenges facing Ohio. How timely. While in the private sector, Treasurer Sprague was a project lead for Ernst & Young, worked on a number of high-profile engagements with Fortune 500 companies before forming his own consulting firm. His commitment to public service is matched only by his love for family. He and his wife, Amanda, continue to live in Findlay with their 5 children. Join me in welcome Ohio Treasurer Robert Sprague.
Thank you, Craig. Really appreciate that. Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. This is my first remote Zoom meeting that we're having with a speaking type of event. Really appreciate Craig's leadership. Let me tell you, these financial markets have been crazy the last few months. And so I know you're facing challenges, obviously, probably going through some cash, as I know the state of Ohio is. So Craig, thanks for your watchful eye on the county treasury. We really appreciate that. Just wanted to also send a shout out to my friends, Rick Perales and Bob Hackett, both of whom have done a great job of representing you down at the Ohio State House. I don't know if they're on today, but I can tell you, good friends, and I know that they are going to do the right things for the state of Ohio. So really appreciate being here with you today. Just a little bit more about myself. You know, we have 5 children. So my wife, Amanda, and I, we live in Findlay with our 5 children. Can you imagine being at home all day with 5 kids running around the house? It has been, I think, it's been a test of our ability as parents. But I also wanted to share with you, just as we begin, some really great things that I noticed with my kids. Some of the things that I like about the quarantine, not everything, but some of the things I like my commute, which is a lot shorter. We actually go on walks together as the family outside. We spend a lot of time exercising. I've actually gotten back into running in the evenings. And we seem to have a lot of time together as a family. We've gotten out board games and been able to do things like Frisbee golf. So a lot of positives there as we try to look on the bright side of our quarantine. And I hope all of you are experiencing some of those same joys that we are in the Sprague family. You know, I think that we've seen the best of our state, the tremendous leadership by Governor DeWine to get on top of this early. And he's shown and highlighted some of the best things that are happening in our state in terms of companies and the ways that they have helped our state respond during his daily press conferences, highlighting some of the ways that Ohio businesses have helped the state respond during this coronavirus crisis. So we greatly appreciate the governor's leadership, and we appreciate the innovation and the willingness of Ohio businesses to come to the aid and create solutions for Ohioans. I wanted to give you a little bit of a background on some of the things that we see coming up as being important and some of the things that we've done. You know, we've really had a period of almost unprecedented volatility in the markets. That becomes tremendously important for our hospital systems. You know, these crises have kind of 3 phases to them. I've been through a natural disaster before as a public official, followed by a recession in 2008 and 2009. And a couple of observations I wanted to share with you. that the first and one of the most critical pieces is this emergency response. And we all know that during the emergency response, it really has been our hospital systems. But our hospital systems ran into trouble about 3 weeks ago. They finance a lot of their short-term credit through variable rate demand obligations. And all of a sudden, that market went from a cost of about 1.3% to 8% in a week. So if you can only imagine being a hospital system trying to run toward the fight of the coronavirus and yet having the expenses pile on for your debt service and not being able to access the capital market is just not a good scenario. And so we sat down and said, what can we do in the Treasurer's office? We have a large balance sheet. How can we help? So we set aside $900 million to purchase some of these variable rate demand obligations of Ohio's hospitals. And we were able to get that rate down to 2% in the matter of a week, which really helped restore some structure to the credit markets, allowed our hospitals to achieve tremendous savings that helped them conserve some of their cost and their cash as they were trying to fight the coronavirus. So it was a very successful program. We were actually able to exit out of it, which was also equally good, so that now our balance sheet is not tied up with those obligations, but we're able to help restore the functioning of the capital markets and really help our hospitals at a time during this emergency phase when they needed it most. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you, some of the pieces that the Treasurer's office is doing. The second piece is, I think we all know that as a result of this crisis, local government credit spreads have widened, and obviously there's going to be some belt tightening for local governments across the state, as well as the state of Ohio itself. And there's a way that we can help with that in the Treasurer's office. We actually are willing to wrap through our Ohio Market Access Program. We're able to wrap our credit of the state around local government. So Craig, if you're doing a debt issuance for any sort of a capital project in the next year or two, and you'd like to use the credit of the Treasurer's office, my pledge to you is that you can use our balance sheet as your own. And that's a tremendous advantage. When he goes to the market, he'll get the same interest rate as the market would give the state of Ohio. So a great way for us to help local governments, whether they're municipalities, counties, or townships, a way that we can put our balance sheet, and quite frankly, the people's money, your money, to work for the people and the institutions of the state of Ohio. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about that market access program that's been tremendously successful. And as credit spreads have widened, in other words, it costs more for smaller communities to borrow than it does for the state, that program is going to become more and more important. So I wanted to share that with you as well. As we move from the emergency phase, I think we're going to quickly look to stand our economy back up. And I know that we're all looking forward to that. I know that I am. And if there's one thing that we've heard loud and clear over the last 2 weeks, it's that Ohioans want to work. Ohioans want to go back to work. And one of the programs that we think is instrumental and very helpful is the SBA 7A loan program that has been recently passed by Congress. And so our office was instrumental in getting out early. I want to thank Marcy Longnecker, who's on this call, for getting out and talking with a lot of local businesses and local government entities, chambers of commerce, about this 7A program, which is part of the CARES package. Marcy and the rest of our public affairs team has done a tremendous job of making sure that Ohio businesses are well represented. And I wanted to report back to you that last week, more than 38,000 loans were approved in the state of Ohio for that SBA 7A program, totaling over $10 billion. And in addition, you've heard recently that yesterday, Congress passed an additional program allowing an additional amount of more legislation for that particular program, and specifically making sure that it targets small businesses and goes to the areas that need it most. And we're continuing to work on programs within the Treasurer's office that we feel would be complementary to that 7A program. As we move from not just the emergency impact of the coronavirus shock, But we also look at the demand shock to the economy and our budgets in the state of Ohio. I think there's two things that we need to look forward in terms of opportunities for our state in the future. The first is that even as car production and airplane production and even oil well production is stalling, we have a tremendous opportunity as a state to look toward the future at some of this reshoring of manufacturing from China, which is sure to occur. We now realize, I think, as a nation that it was a mistake to source certain critical items like ventilators and leave our technology to those manufacturing companies that are only overseas. The disruption of the supply chain has shown how vulnerable we are, and I think that there'll be a reshoring of that manufacturing activity that for 3 decades has really left our state. And we in Ohio, we still know how to make things. In Ohio, we are good at it, and I think we're perfectly positioned to take advantage of some of that reshoring of manufacturing that will come in the next year. And so our ability to manage our balance sheet, make smart strategic investments in infrastructure to position ourselves better than other states to recapture the largest share of that manufacturing, I think is going to be critical in the coming months. The other piece, I think, as we move forward is we've seen, when I was in the legislature, I did a lot of work on the heroin issue. And I think that that was also a public health problem that cost billions of dollars and cost the state of Ohio tens of thousands of lives, just like the coronavirus epidemic. And we have a tremendous opportunity ahead of us as we look at public health in the state of Ohio to determine how we can do a better job at organizing our public health system and structuring new ideas and a kind of a re-engineering of our public health system toward programs that work. And as Craig mentioned in the intro, we've introduced a brand new program in Ohio called Results Ohio, which is built to go to the private sector and fund only those programs that produce results. That's why we're calling it Results Ohio. It's a great way for the state of Ohio to be able to try new things. We measure the results of those programs, and at the end of the day, after the pilot project occurs and we measure the results, we only pay for the things that have success. And so innovation, which has been the lifeblood of Ohio for a long period of time, and one of our strengths, we feel like is going to be our solution to the next public health epidemic, and we hope that Results Ohio can play a strong part of that. So those are some of the ways in which the Treasurer's Office has helped during the emergency phase, and ways in which we hope to help later as Ohio takes advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us to have a stronger tomorrow. And at this point, Alex, just wanted to thank you so very much for having me today, and Michael, really appreciate the opportunity to address you by Zoom. And if you have the capability and the time, I'd love to answer any questions that at Rotary you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Treasurer. Okay, is there any questions for our Treasurer?
I have a question, Robert. As the governor mentioned yesterday in his briefing, this coronavirus is going to have a big impact on the state because the costs of services are going up and the revenues are almost zero coming to the state. So could you talk a little bit about the impact that this virus is going to have and it will have on specifically what you're doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. I think that there's two, there's three impacts really that we could put into buckets. The first is the dramatic drop in sales tax revenue and income tax revenue as a result directly of the coronavirus and everybody staying at home for the last month or so. There's different estimates for that. It might be around about $1 billion reduction for the state. We'll have to see if that transpires, but that's kind of a one-time shock to our revenues. And we do have almost $2.5 billion in the rainy day fund. So That's a good match. It's a one-time shock with one-time money that we've already set aside for emergencies. And I think this clearly constitutes an emergency. The second shock, one-time shock, if you will, is really a timing effect. So we've moved our income tax collection date from April 15th to now July 15th. Again, maybe that's not a big deal necessarily to the taxpayers as a help to the taxpayers, but obviously we now have to fund 3 more months of expenditures while we wait for those income tax collections. Again, we're unsure about the fiscal impact of that exactly, but we estimate it to be substantial. However, that money will eventually come in, and so that more is just a cash management issue that we have to deal with as we look at our cash burn, and we're able and capable, and we are dealing very well with that cash need and that cash delay for the 3 months. And then I think the third bucket, which is much more difficult to solve and really is going to be solved by the governor working together with the General Assembly, is the one that's going to face both the state of Ohio and many local governments, which is on an ongoing basis, what is going to be the reduction in revenues from the state? If we do have a recession, what does that look like? And how do we pull those expenses in line with revenues? And the reason that that's so important, and I think the reason that that's important to do without raising taxes, is because once we're able to match up expenditures and revenues and get those in line so that we don't have a structural deficit, it then allows us to use our balance sheet. It allows us to use our balance sheet in the future to invest and create infrastructure projects that, first of all, can, from an investment perspective or an asset perspective, give us a tremendous opportunity to grow in the future. In other words, create strategic roads, bridges, 5G, broadband, and other things that I haven't thought of that I'm sure the governor's office is looking at that will help position us to be more successful in the next 10 years. But also, those projects will help get people back to work and provide an impetus for employment in the state of Ohio, and hopefully a positive injection of money into our economy as we look at this next year. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I think of when we look at our fiscal challenge.
Okay, are there any other questions for the treasurer?
This is Bob Koshoy. Do you have any concerns with from the economic fallout of the coronavirus on the stability of Ohio-issued municipal bonds?
I think that there are 2 factors there in terms of the Ohio issuance of municipal bonds. The first is, I think that we've seen the credit market stabilize, that we will be able to go to the market and issue debt. However, credit spreads have widened, and what that means in financial jargon, it would be called a credit spread. It basically is how much extra in interest you have to pay over a benchmark or a kind of a risk-free rate. And you're going to see that widen. You're going to see that widen because the fundamental underlying credit of local governments and also of the state is going to be damaged by lower revenues unless we get our expenses in line right away. So you're going to see a little bit of credit contraction, credit quality contraction there. But I think that in the long run, we're going to be strong. Ohio's municipalities, local governments, counties, townships, and the state of Ohio itself has always been strong. We have a strong financing structure, and I think that we'll be able to show to the credit rating agencies that we're going to deal with this budget problem proactively and successfully. So I think that's the first piece, is our ability to access the credit market and the credit rating itself. And then I think the second piece is really trying to, and I hope we can all do this, help support our governments as they make difficult decisions ahead about their budgets to try to get those in line and not have a structural deficit over the next couple of years.
Okay, are there any other questions for our treasurer?
Yeah, I've got a really important one for you. Who do you root for when Duke plays Carolina?
Well, that's a great question. So, a little bit more background. My wife, Amanda, is a Carolina grad, and I went to Duke undergrad, and I got my MBA from the University of North Carolina. I think that your loyalties normally lie with your undergrad institution, so I root for Duke, but I do it very quietly at home.
Okay. Any other questions for our treasurer? Treasurer, thank you very much. I appreciate this is your first Zoom meeting, and once we get rid of the social distancing, you're welcome to come to the club, and we'll meet you in person. Usually what we do is we have you sign a book, and we dedicate it to the Beaver Creek Library in your name, so we would like to do that some other time. So whenever you're down here, we'll do that. So I appreciate it. All right, for the rest of the club, is there anything else for the good of the club or any other questions?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Bob Grant speaking next week, and he's going to address how the university and the athletic department is keeping in touch with their student athletes.
Great. Thank you, Mike. All right, is there anything else? All right, everybody, have a great week. I'll see you next Friday on Zoom. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Treasurer.
Alex, thanks for letting me join in.
Yep, Dan, let your club know. We'll send these invites out to anybody in the Fairborn and Xenia clubs.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Stay safe and healthy.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.